Camden Hayes froze mid-conversation at his colleague's wedding reception, champagne glass slipping from his fingers, as the opening notes of "That's Why You Go Away" began to play. His 5-year-old daughter, Josie, looked up at him, confused why Daddy had stopped breathing. The CEO who built a tech empire and raised a child alone couldn't move, because that voice singing on stage was impossible. A ghost from 20 years ago wrapped in a melody he'd tried to forget. 20 years since he'd heard that song. 20 years since he'd let the woman he loved walk away without a fight. And now she was here, 10 feet from him, singing the one song that had predicted everything that went wrong between them. That morning, Camden had stood in his bathroom practicing something he still struggled with after 5 years of fatherhood. Josie brushed her teeth beside him, humming off-key, while he stared at his reflection and whispered, "I love you." The words felt less foreign now than they had when Josie first came home, a 1-year-old orphan who needed to hear those 3 syllables every single night. He'd learned. Slowly, painfully, but he'd learned. "You already said that at breakfast, Daddy," Josie said, through a mouthful of toothpaste foam. "I know, sweetheart. Just making sure I don't forget." She rinsed and grinned. "You never forget. You say it every night before bed." Camden met his own eyes in the mirror. With Josie, yes, the words came easily now. But with other adults, they still caught in his throat like glass shards. Old habits died hard, and Camden's habit of silence had nearly killed him once before. He'd almost skipped Harper Sullivan's wedding. Josie had been cranky all week, and wedding receptions weren't exactly 5-year-old friendly. But Harper was his most reliable VP, and she'd specifically asked him to come. "My college friend is singing," she'd mentioned last week, eyes bright with excitement. "You'll love her voice. She's doing this old MLTR song, 'That's Why You Go Away.'" You know it. Camden had frozen at his desk, pulse spiking, but Harper had already moved on to discuss quarterly projections. He'd told himself it was coincidence. Lots of people sang that song. It didn't mean anything. He'd glanced at the wedding program that morning, saw the song title listed, felt his chest tighten, and shoved the paper in his pocket. Paranoia, he'd told himself. The universe didn't work that way. Except, apparently, it did. Now Camden stood in Harper Sullivan's wedding reception champagne, pooling at his feet, world tilting on its axis. The ballroom blurred laughter, clinking glasses, the rustle of expensive dresses, all of it disappeared the moment those piano keys began. Josie tugged his sleeve harder. "Daddy, you're being weird?" But Camden couldn't answer. His chest had locked up ribs, squeezing around lungs that forgot how to work. Because that voice belonged to Reese Holloway, and Reese Holloway was supposed to be a memory, not a woman standing under a spotlight 10 feet away, singing the song that had destroyed him 2 decades ago. He'd been 19 when he first heard this song. Reese had played it on a scratched CD player in Stanford's campus coffee shop, insisting it was the most honest breakup song ever written. Camden had disagreed. He didn't believe songs could predict futures or capture emotions better than silence could. But Reese had smiled that knowing smile, the one that said she saw through all his carefully constructed walls and told him someday he'd understand. She'd been right. 3 years later, when she walked out of his apartment for the last time, this song had played on repeat in his head for months. "Baby's crying, but you never say why." That line had haunted him. Still did. Stanford had been different back then. Camden arrived with a scholarship, a chip on his shoulder, and a reputation for being brilliant but cold. Professors praised his analytical mind. Classmates avoided him in study groups. He preferred it that way. Emotions were distractions, connections were liabilities, and he had ambitions that required singular focus. Then Reese showed up in his advanced literature seminar, late on the first day, rain dripping from her coat. She'd sat next to him, pulled out a notebook covered in song lyrics, and coffee stains, asked to borrow a pen. He'd handed her one without looking up. She'd smiled anyway, like his rudeness was amusing rather than off-putting. Their friendship shouldn't have worked. Camden studied economics and computer science calculated risks spoke in data. Reese studied poetry and music therapy believed in intuition, spoke in metaphors, but somehow, between late-night library sessions and arguments about whether spreadsheets or songs better explained human behavior, something shifted. Camden started waiting for her terrible jokes. Reese started leaving sticky notes with song recommendations on his laptop. By junior year, they were inseparable. By senior year, they were in love, though. Camden had never actually said those words out loud. That had been the problem. Reese needed words. She needed "I love you." Spoken, plainly needed reassurance that his silence didn't equal indifference. Camden showed love through actions, remembering her coffee order, fixing her laptop at 3 in the morning, listening to her talk about dreams of helping traumatized kids find their voices through music. But he couldn't say the words. Every time he tried, they lodged in his throat like broken glass. His parents had screamed, "I love you," at each other, before every fight, before every slammed door, before the divorce that shattered his childhood into before and after. Words were weapons in the Hayes household tools, people used to inflict maximum damage. So Camden learned silence, safer that way. Actions mattered, words lied. Except Reese needed both, and Camden could only give one. She'd tried. God, she'd tried. "And do you love me, Cam?" she'd asked one night after graduation, curled up on his couch. He'd nodded, squeezed her hand, changed the subject. "I need to hear it," she'd whispered months later, voice breaking. He'd kissed her forehead, held her tighter, said nothing. The silence between them grew heavier each day, filling spaces where words should have lived. The end came on a Tuesday. Reese had shown up at his apartment, eyes red, shoulders, set in that way. That meant she'd made a decision. "I met someone," she'd said quietly. Camden's world had tilted. "Someone who talks to me, who says what he feels." She'd looked at him then, one last chance for him to fight, to speak, to break his silence. But Camden had only nodded, throat closing around words that wouldn't come. He'd thought he was setting her free, giving her what she needed. He'd thought letting her go without a fight was love. She'd left his apartment that night, and he'd sat on the floor until dawn, that damn song playing from her forgotten CD player, every lyric a knife. He'd kept the CD player, buried it in a drawer, built Hayes Ventures from nothing, made millions, dated occasionally but never seriously. Silence killed those relationships too, one by one. And 4 years ago, sitting in a foster agency meeting, he'd met Josie. 1-year-old blonde, curls, brown eyes that reminded him of his mother. The social worker said most single men didn't adopt. Camden signed the papers anyway. If he couldn't say, "I love you," to a woman, maybe he could learn to say it to a child who desperately needed to hear it. Turned out he'd been right. Josie taught him what 20 years of therapy never could, that love spoken out loud mattered. That silence, no matter how well-intentioned, was still a form of abandonment. Now standing in Harper Sullivan's wedding reception, with that voice pouring through the speakers, Camden realized he'd been running from Reese Holloway for 20 years, and she'd just caught him. The song continued. Reese's voice wrapped around lyrics about babies crying and people leaving, and the unbearable weight of wondering why love wasn't enough. Camden forced himself to look at the stage. Spotlight caught her in profile, older, now hair shorter than he remembered, but unmistakably her. Navy dress that moved when she breathed, eyes closed as she sang. When she reached the chorus, "That's why you go away, I know," her voice cracked slightly on, "No, dear," and something in Camden's chest cracked with it. The song ended. Applause erupted. Reese opened her eyes, and for one terrible, beautiful second, they locked onto his. Her smile froze. The microphone nearly slipped from her hand. Then Harper was hugging her, thanking her for the beautiful performance, and the moment shattered. Reese disappeared into the crowd. Camden stood rooted, Josie now tugging urgently. "Daddy, I need the bathroom." He moved on autopilot, walking Josie to the restrooms waiting outside, trying to remember how to breathe. When had Reese become friends with Harper? How had he not known the wedding program burned in his pocket? He'd seen the song title and ignored it, told himself it meant nothing. Coward, he thought bitterly, still running after all these years. Josie emerged, chattering about decorations and asking for more cake. Camden nodded absently, scanning the reception. Groups of guests clustered around cocktail tables. The band started something upbeat and forgettable. Then he saw her. Reese stood near the garden doors, talking to an older couple, laughing at something they said. But her shoulders were tight, smile not quite reaching her eyes. She glanced toward where Camden had been standing earlier, and when she didn't see him, something like disappointment crossed her face. Camden made a decision. He took Josie's hand and walked toward the garden doors. 20 years dissolved with each step. He'd faced boardrooms full of hostile executives, pitched to venture capitalists who could destroy companies with a word. But approaching Reese Holloway felt like standing at a cliff edge with no safety net. She saw him coming. Her conversation faltered. The older couple excused themselves. Then it was just Camden, Josie, and Reese in the doorway between reception hall and moonlit garden. Nobody spoke. Josie, bless her, broke the silence. "You're really good at singing. Do you know Let It Go?" Reese's laugh came out shaky. "A few Disney songs, yeah." She crouched to Josie's level. "What's your favorite?" "Let It Go, but Daddy banned it. 3 hours straight last Tuesday," Camden said quietly. Voice rougher than intended. Reese looked up at him, and the full force of her green eyes hit like a physical blow. 20 years. She'd aged beautifully, laugh lines at her eyes, silver threads in brown hair, confidence in her posture that hadn't existed before. But her eyes were the same. Searching. Hopeful. Careful. "Hi, Cam." Nobody had called him that in 2 decades. "Hi, Reese." They stood there, canyon of history between them. Josie looked between them with the unnervingly perceptive gaze of children who sense adult weirdness. "Are you Daddy's friend?" "He doesn't have many friends." "Josie," Camden started. "We were friends," Reese said softly. "A long time ago." "Why did you stop?" Josie asked, with brutal 5-year-old honesty. Reese's eyes flickered to Camden's. "That's complicated, sweetheart. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to tell the truth," Josie announced, then spotted another child near the dessert table and took off running. The silence stretched. Camden shoved his hands in his pockets, feeling 17 again. "I didn't know you'd be here. Harper and I went to different colleges, but same study abroad program in London." Reese wrapped her arms around herself despite the warm evening. "She mentioned her CEO was coming. I didn't connect it until I saw Hayes Ventures on the guest list. Should have known." "You could have warned me." It came out sharper than intended, accusatory. Reese's expression shuddered. "Would you have come if I had?" He didn't answer. They both knew he wouldn't have. "The song choice was intentional then," Camden said. Reese looked toward the garden where fairy lights twinkled in trees. "Harper asked me to sing something meaningful. That song has been meaningful to me for 20 years. Meaningful." The word felt insufficient. "Is that what we're calling it?" "What would you call it?" Edge in her voice. Now first crack in careful composure. Camden wanted to say devastating, or prophetic, or soundtrack to the worst mistake I ever made. But the words tangled the same way they always had. The silence grew heavy. Reese laughed bitterly. "Some things never change." That stung. It should have, but it sparked something rare flash of anger at himself, at her, at 20 years of cowardice. You left. You told me you'd met someone else and walked out. Because you never asked me to stay, Reese shot back, voice rising. Then she caught herself, glanced around. This isn't the place. Then where? Camden heard himself ask. Because I've spent 20 years wondering what I should have said that night. Reese stared at him. Something shifted in her expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. Your daughter is beautiful. What's her name? Josie. I adopted her 4 years ago. You adopted? Reese broke off, processing. You always said you didn't want kids. I said I didn't know how to be a father. Different thing. He watched Josie playing near the dessert table, her laugh carrying across the hall. Turned out I was right. Didn't know how. But she needed someone, and I needed... He stopped. I needed her. Reese's eyes softened. She seems happy. Most days. Camden turned back. What about you? Harper mentioned music therapy, working with kids. Yeah, children who've experienced trauma. Music helps them process what they can't say. Pause, then quietly. Turns out I'm good at translating silence. The jab landed, gentle, sad observation, not attack. Camden absorbed it, deserved it. Reese, about that night. Don't. She held up a hand. It was 20 years ago. We were different people. Were we? Camden asked. Because I still can't find the right words and you're still expecting me to. The truth hung between them. Reese looked at him for a long moment, then toward the hall, where music and laughter continued without them. I need air. Walk with me. They ended up in the garden courtyard, fairy lights casting soft shadows on stone pathways. Josie had found a friend. Camden texted his assistant to watch her. Then he and Reese walked in silence, footsteps crunching on gravel until they reached a bench overlooking the reflecting pool. They sat, careful space between them. I lied, Reese said abruptly. Camden turned. What? That night? When I said I'd met someone, I lied. The world tilted. What? There was never anyone else. Reese's voice trembled but held steady. I said it because I thought you'd feel relieved. Thought if I gave you a guilt-free exit, you'd take it. I was right. You did. Camden felt punched. You lied about having someone else. I was 23 and desperate and convinced you didn't love me. Words tumbling now. Every time I asked, you went silent. Every time I needed reassurance, you changed subjects. I started thinking maybe I was too much. Maybe you were just too kind to say you wanted out. So I gave you one, a clean exit, and you took it without a fight. Because I thought you deserved better, Camden said hoarsely. I thought you'd found someone who could give you what I couldn't. Words, promises, everything I was too damaged to offer. You weren't damaged. You were scared. Same thing. They sat in silence. Night breeze rustled trees. Wedding band played something slow and romantic. Finally, Camden spoke. I kept your CD player, the one you left. Reese looked at him sharply. You kept it. Couldn't throw it away. Couldn't play it either. Just kept it in my desk for 20 years, like some pathetic shrine. He laughed bitterly. Josie found it last year. Asked why I had such an old thing. I told her it belonged to someone important. Did you tell her about me? I told her about a woman I loved who taught me that silence is the loudest form of goodbye. Reese made a sound, half sob, half laugh. That's the most you've ever said about us out loud. I know. Camden turned to face her fully. I'm sorry for being too scared to fight. For letting you think I didn't care enough to ask you to stay. For making you feel like you needed to invent someone else just to leave. I'm sorry for lying, Reese whispered. For not trusting that your actions meant what I needed them to mean. They sat with their apologies, letting them settle. Camden reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, extracted something small and white. paper folded many times, edges worn soft. What's that? Camden unfolded it carefully. Lyrics to That's Why You Go Away. You wrote them down once. Said if I ever wondered why people leave, I should read this. He looked at her. I read it every few months for 20 years. Reese's eyes filled. Did you understand? Yeah. Baby's crying, but you never say why. That was me. You kept asking what I felt, and I kept crying through silence, expecting you to translate pain I wouldn't voice. You left because you had to, because staying with someone who can't speak love out loud is drowning slowly. A tear slipped down Reese's cheek. That's more understanding than I ever expected from you. Josie taught me, kids need words. I love you every night. I'm proud of you after every drawing. You're safe after every nightmare. I had to learn for her. And once I started, I realized how many times I should have said it to you. Reese wiped her eyes. Did you mean it? What you implied about loving me? Camden took a breath. The cliff edge. He could retreat into safe silence or jump. I loved you then. I love you now. I've loved you every day for 20 years. I was just too much of a coward to say it when it mattered. Reese stared, then started laughing, sound caught between joy and disbelief. 20 years. 20 years, Camden Hayes, and you finally say it in a garden at someone else's wedding. Better late than never. You're impossible. I know. Completely emotionally stunted. Working on it. And you have a daughter who needs stability, not some random woman from your past. You're not random, Camden interrupted. You're the reason I learned to say I love you at all. You're the reason I adopted Josie after you left. I realized I needed to learn how to love out loud, or I'd die alone. You're not random, Reese. You're the most important person I've ever known. Silence that felt different, full instead of empty, bridge instead of chasm. Reese reached over, took his hand. Her fingers were warm. Real. I moved to Seattle after we ended. Got my music therapy degree. Built a whole life helping kids find their voices. The whole time I listened to that song and wondered if you ever thought about me. Every day. Every single day. They sat there, hands linked, as the reception continued without them. Eventually, Josie came looking, declaring she was tired. She eyed their joined hands with interest, but said nothing. As they walked toward the hall, Reese stopped. Can I see you again properly? Not at someone else's wedding. Camden smiled, real smile, the kind Josie said made him look younger. Breakfast tomorrow. There's a diner that makes excellent waffles. Josie rates it 11 out of 10. Sold. Reese scribbled her number on a napkin. Text me the address. Driving home with Josie dozing in back, Camden kept glancing at the napkin on his dashboard. 20 years, and he had Reese Holloway's number again. It felt surreal and terrifying, and like the first breath after holding it for 2 decades. Daddy. Josie's sleepy voice came from behind. Is the singing lady going to be our friend? Camden thought about friendship and second chances, and learning to speak love in a language that had cost him everything the first time. Yeah, sweetheart, I think she might be. Good. She has nice eyes. The diner next morning was Camden's favorite hole-in-the-wall coffee and chipped mugs, syrup bottles on every table. Josie ordered chocolate chip pancakes, started building towers from sugar packets. Reese slid into the booth across from Camden, looking younger in jeans and a sweater. So, she said, accepting coffee. Tell me about the last 20 years. They talked for 3 hours. Camden told her about building Hayes Ventures, about crushing loneliness of success, about meeting Josie, and knowing instantly she was meant to be his daughter. Reese told him about Seattle, her work with traumatized children, about learning that helping others find their voice was her own form of healing. They laughed about their younger selves, so serious and certain. They didn't avoid the painful parts. Josie, finishing her second waffle, looked between them. Are you going to marry her, Daddy? Camden choked on coffee. Reese turned red. Josie. Mrs. Patterson says people who look at each other like you do are either married or should be. Josie delivered this with gospel confidence. Mrs. Patterson was her kindergarten teacher and a parent's secret romantic. How about we start with breakfast? Reese said diplomatically, eyes sparkling. Maybe another breakfast. See what happens. Okay, Josie agreed, crisis averted. Camden met Reese's gaze, both trying not to laugh. New territory dating with a 5-year-old chaperone who had opinions. But it felt right. Real. They saw each other the next week, and the week after. Camden took Josie to one of Reese's therapy sessions, watched from the doorway as she guided traumatized children through expressing pain via instruments and song. He saw how she knelt to their level, listened to what they couldn't say, translated silence into healing, and he understood what he'd lost 20 years ago. Not just a woman, but a partner who understood that love came in different languages. Reese came to Josie's kindergarten play, whispered running commentary that made Camden bite back laughter. She met his business partners at a dinner, charmed everyone with dry wit and refusal to be impressed by venture capital talk. She fit into his life like she'd always been there. 3 months in, sitting in the park watching Josie on swings, Camden said it. I know Seattle is your home. I know you have roots. But I'm asking you to consider uprooting them. For us, for a second chance. Reese was quiet long enough that Camden's heart sank. Then she turned. I need you to say it again. Out loud. The way you should have 20 years ago. Camden took her hands, looked directly in her eyes. I love you, Reese Holloway. I'm in love with you. I want you in my life, in Josie's life, and every morning and night. I want to be the partner you deserved then and deserve now. Will you consider moving here? Let me try. She was quiet. Then, I need to see you maintain this. Not 3 months of honeymoon phase where you try hard, then slip back into silence. I need 6 months of therapy. 6 months of you practicing saying hard things out loud to me, to Josie, to your partners, when they disappoint you. I need to see this become who you are, not just something you're doing to win me back. Camden felt the ground shift, not away but toward something solid. She wasn't saying no. She was saying prove it. Okay, 6 months, therapy. I'll do it. And I'm keeping my Seattle practice open, Reese continued. I'll come down weekends. We date long distance first. We don't rush this. We don't rush this, Camden agreed. Josie cheered from the swings. The 6 months were harder than Camden expected. Therapy forced him to excavate wounds he'd buried for decades, to name the fear that made silence feel safer than speech. He practiced saying, I'm frustrated, when board meetings went badly. I'm scared, when Josie got sick. I need help, when work overwhelmed him. The words felt clumsy at first, foreign in his mouth, but slowly they became easier. Reese came down every Friday, stayed through Sunday. They built routines: Saturday morning farmer's market, Sunday brunch with Josie. They fought twice, real fights where Camden's instinct was to shut down. Both times he forced himself to stay, to speak, to work through it. Both times, Reese held his hand and said, See, we survived it. At the 6-month mark, Reese's Seattle practice had a waiting list. Her weekends in San Francisco had stretched to 4 days. She'd started keeping clothes at Camden's place, started calling Josie just to chat. When Camden asked her again, Will you move here? She'd smiled and said, I already started looking at office spaces last month. She moved to San Francisco that fall, found an office near Camden's, built a new practice, slowly, carefully wove herself into their lives. She taught Josie piano. She sat through Camden's business dinners, asking questions that made his partners rethink strategies. And when Camden worked late, he kept the old CD player on his desk, no longer hidden, no longer painful. Sometimes he played that song and felt gratitude instead of grief. 1 year after Harper Sullivan's wedding, they were back at the same venue for the anniversary party. Harper asked Reese to perform again. This time, when Reese took the stage, Camden stood front row with Josie. The first notes of "That's Why You Go Away" began, but this time, when Reese sang about babies crying and love leaving, she looked directly at Camden and smiled a smile that said, "We changed the ending." After the performance, Reese found them in the garden, same spot they'd confessed truths a year ago. "So," she said, breathless. "What did you think?" Camden pulled the old CD player from his pocket. "I think this proved its point. We rewrote the prophecy." Reese took it, cradling it carefully. "Or we could give it to Josie. Pass it down." Josie perked up. "Can I have it?" Camden knelt to her level. "This belonged to someone I loved when I was young. She gave it to me when I didn't know how to say I loved her back. Took me 20 years to learn. Think you can take better care of it than I did?" "I'll keep it forever," Josie promised. "It brought your dad and me back together," Reese said softly. "Maybe it is magic." They walked back as a family. Imperfect, scarred, but together. The band played. Guests danced. And Camden Hayes, who'd spent 40 years believing silence was safety, finally understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak. "I love you. Stay. Let me try again." 3 phrases that changed everything. Later, when Harper pulled Reese aside to thank her for singing, Camden stood at the edge of the dance floor with Josie. The band started a slow song. Couples filled the floor. Josie tugged his hand. "Daddy, you should dance with Reese." "You think so?" "Mrs. Patterson says when you love someone, you should tell them in front of everyone so they know you mean it." Out of the mouths of babes, Camden found Reese near the bar, extended his hand. "Dance with me." She took it. They moved to the center of the floor, and Camden was very aware of every eye on them. Harper grinning. Josie watching seriously, his business partners looking surprised. Reese fit against him like she always had. The song played. They swayed. And Camden, surrounded by witnesses, said clearly, "I love you, Reese Holloway, in case I haven't said it enough yet." She laughed, eyes bright. "You've said it plenty, but I don't mind hearing it again." "Good, because I plan to keep saying it. Publicly. Loudly. For anyone who'll listen." That's quite a turnaround from the guy who couldn't say 3 words in private. "Well," Camden pulled her closer. "I had a good teacher. 2, actually." He glanced at Josie, who waved enthusiastically from the sidelines. "Turns out love is a language. Just took me 40 years to learn it." The song ended. Applause rippled through the crowd, not for the band, but for them. Camden didn't care. He kissed Reese there on the dance floor in front of everyone and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the knowledge that he'd finally gotten it right. 20 years late, but right nonetheless. That night, driving home with Josie asleep in back and Reese in the passenger seat, humming that damn song under her breath, Camden realized the lyrics had been wrong all along. "That's why you go away, I know," they said. But the real lesson was simpler. That's why you stay. Because someone finally learned to ask. Because silence transformed into speech. Because love, when spoken out loud, becomes the kind of magic that brings people home. And if a 5-year-old with a battered CD player wanted to believe it was the song that did it, well, maybe she wasn't wrong.